Imagine a global crisis, one that's got the world's oil supply in a stranglehold, suddenly looks like it's all over. Markets start to rally, world leaders are breathing a sigh of relief, and then, just hours later, the whole thing completely unravels. Well, that's exactly what happened on Friday, April 17th, 2026. Today, we're going to break down that one single chaotic day. But before we get into the high-stakes politics and the wild market swings, I want to start with something a little more grounded. A lunch tray on a U.S. warship. For the thousands of American service members right in the middle of this, the conflict is very, very real. And this description of a meal on the USS Tripoli, it kind of paints a picture of the conditions they're dealing with out there. And on top of that, you've got this. As of April, all mail delivery to the region just stopped indefinitely. Think about that. No care packages, no essential supplies from home, not even letters. For military families back home, it's this incredibly frustrating and worrying silence. A silence that, for a moment, everyone hoped was about to finally break.
Okay, so keeping all that in mind, let's jump to the morning of that Friday. Because for a few hours, it really, truly seemed like the crisis was ending. The world woke up to this rapid-fire series of announcements that all pointed to a major de-escalation.
What's so wild here is just the sheer speed of it all. I mean, look at this timeline. In less than 2 hours, we go from a declaration by Iran's foreign minister to what sounds like a total victory lap from the U.S. president. 9:04 a.m., Iran says the strait is open. By 10:50 a.m., President Trump is on social media declaring Iran has agreed to never close it again. It looked like a done deal.
And that was the message that blasted out to the world. A direct quote from President Trump framing this whole thing as a great victory. The tone was completely triumphant. It sounded like a definitive end to the crisis. But, the devil is always in the details.
And right here, this is where the story takes a sharp turn, because the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz wasn't the simple win it was made out to be. Turns out, the very same announcements that brought so much relief also contained the seeds of the next standoff. This slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? The U.S. says, great, the strait is open, but just so you know, our naval blockade is staying right where it is. And Iran's response is immediate. Hold on. If you keep the blockade, that's a violation and we will retaliate. They weren't even celebrating the same deal. One side's victory was the other side's absolute red line. And that is the most dangerous kind of misunderstanding, right? When both sides think the other is breaking the rules, it's a fast track straight back to conflict.
And Iran really didn't mince words. The statement from their foreign ministry wasn't some vague diplomatic warning. It was a direct threat, a very stark reminder that they still held the key to that waterway, and they could turn that lock again whenever they wanted. But before this massive complication really sunk in, that initial wave of good news sent ripples all around the globe. For a very brief, shining moment, it seemed like peace had actually broken out.
The first place you saw the reaction? The oil markets. The price of Brent crude oil plunged by more than 5%, almost instantly. We're talking billions of dollars in relief for the global economy, just like that. And of course, Wall Street felt it too. Stock futures shot up, with the Dow projected to jump over 500 points at the opening bell. That is a massive signal of investor optimism. It's a huge bet that a major threat to global trade had just been taken off the table. Now, the diplomats were a little more cautious, but still optimistic. The UN called it a step in the right direction. But look a little closer here. Even as allies were welcoming the news, they were already planning a multinational military mission to protect shipping lanes. That tells you everything, right? Behind all the public handshakes, nobody really believed this thing was over. They knew just how fragile the situation was. And you have to remember, this whole Hormuz standoff wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was all tied into this U.S.-brokered ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, another hotspot where tensions were still incredibly high. And the stakes there were just immense. An Israeli invasion of Lebanon had already left more than 2,000 people dead and displaced over 1 million. These aren't just statistics on a chart. We're talking about a region totally shattered by violence, where any ceasefire is walking on eggshells. And sound familiar? Just like with the US and Iran, the leaders on the ground were not speaking the language of lasting peace. You have the Lebanese president taking this hard line on sovereignty, while Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is basically saying the fight's not over. That doesn't sound like a stable peace, does it? This quote from Prime Minister Netanyahu, it really just sums up the mood of the entire day. It's the perfect encapsulation of the paradox, an offer of peace that's backed up by a threat of war.
It's the tightrope the entire world was watching, because a peace offered with a weapon in hand can be taken back in a heartbeat. So, at the end of the day, we're left with this question. A day that started with what looked like a historic breakthrough ended in a dangerous standoff. A waterway was opened, but a blockade remained. A ceasefire was called, but the will to fight was stronger than ever. So, was this really an ending, or was it just the beginning of a new and maybe even more dangerous chapter in this whole conflict?